What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about the Lac-Mégantic rail disaster. So, to be honest, I have never heard of this incident before, but I mean, just the name alone kind of tells me that this is going to be a disturbing story. So apparently, this is something horrible that happened in Canada, in Quebec, in 2013. And that is all I know about this. So let's take a look.
On the 6th of July, 2013, in the early hours of the morning, a freight train which had been parked for the night on the railway tracks near Nantes in Quebec started to move. Slowly at first, and then with greater and greater speed, it began to roll downhill towards the nearby town of Lac-Mégantic.
What? Lac-Mégantic? That's how you... I was wondering how you pronounce that. The train just started moving? What are there, ghosts? Like, what? This thing was parked, but facing downhill. Okay, this is... I've never heard anything like that's happened quite like this with trains, or a huge disaster with a train that just started rolling towards a town.
The train consisted of 72 tanker cars, each one bearing a full load of crude oil. With nobody on board and nothing to stop it, the train barreled towards the sleeping town, which was about to experience one of the worst rail disasters in Canadian history.
The whole thing was filled with crude oil. Why is it always gotta be? Can't there be a train that rolls downhill towards the town that's filled with big fluffy pillows? Can't it ever be like a marshmallow train? It's got to be the oil train. For one, I'm sure that made it 10 times worse or more. Okay, let's get into this.
On the 5th of July 2013, a freight train was making its way east across Canada, travelling from Newtown in North Dakota to an oil refinery in St. John, New Brunswick.
Okay.
The train consisted of 72 tanker cars loaded with 113,000 litres, or 30,000 gallons, of crude oil, as well as not one but 5 locomotives to provide the power necessary to drive it.
So this thing was a behemoth. Tons of horsepower, engines, filled to the britches with oil. Sort of a disaster waiting to happen, except you would normally assume there's the proper, safety protocols in place. I can't believe that this is a train that was just parked somewhere and it just started rolling downhill. Like, that is so sad, and it seems totally preventable. I mean, just from what I'm hearing so far, this was in 2013. This is recent. I don't remember ever hearing about this. This was only 12 years ago.
As it neared Lac-Mégantic, night was falling. The lone engineer on board, a man named Tom Harding, was scheduled to leave the train on the main track at Nantes overnight, so that it could be picked up by another driver in the morning to continue its journey.
Okay.
He might have been glad to leave the train, as it had been experiencing technical difficulties for much of its route. The lead locomotive was spewing excessive amounts of smoke. Before leaving the train, Mr. Harding had to make it secure. To do this, he applied multiple handbrakes on all 5 locomotives.
I'm shaking my head because it's like, we all know a disaster is coming, and it's frustrating to just sit here and listen, it like as if we can change anything about this. But it's still frustrating to hear. It's like, oh, the train was experiencing technical difficulties, spewing extra smoke, and like it's that I can't even talk. I'm so bothered by this. And this train that's experiencing all these technical difficulties that they should definitely address, It's filled with highly explosive oil. Okay, yeah, of course.
and checked that they were sufficient to hold the train in place.
And okay, he just applied a bunch of hand brakes. That's really how you stop like a big tanker oil train? That's how you park it? You like twist a wheel a couple of times by hand? That's how, I mean, I'm no expert in this. I mean, that's just how it works though. Like you would think maybe, I don't know, be some kind of like big industrial automated parking brake or something to make sure this thing doesn't move.
An important step given that it was parked on a very slight downward gradient. This done, he contacted his employers, the Montreal, Maine, and Atlantic Railway.
Okay.
He told them about the excess smoke, and after some discussion, they agreed to leave the train where it was and deal with the problem in the morning.
Oh. Oh. They did. Okay, thank God. I was thinking, if this was caused by technical difficulties that were never addressed, that is purely the fault of this one train operator. He did report it. And the powers that be decided, we'll get to that in the morning. Don't worry about that. What could go wrong? You know, get to that in the morning. I gotta sleep. Gotta eat. So they left it overnight. Okay, let's keep going.
Mr. Harding left the site in a taxi, bound for the hotel in Lac-Mégantic where he usually stayed when working this route.
Okay.
Before the next morning could come, a small fire broke out in the smokestack of one of the locomotives. Although the cause was not known at the time, it was later revealed that the fire and the excess smoke which had come before it were down to a bad repair job that had been done on an engine several months before.
Isn't it just amazing the smallest all these little series of events that have to happen? There has to be the engine goes out of commission, so they get it repaired. The repairman does a bad job repairing it. They drive it to Lac-Mégantic, the town. They park it there overnight. They wait. They wait to fix it until later. They just, in the morning. Seemingly harmless decisions, except the shoddy repair job. That's just unexcusable. They park it on a slightly downhill gradient. But all the brakes are applied. Nothing should go wrong. All these little things that add up perfectly to result in a disaster like this. It's crazy how that works.
A repair which had now finally failed. Passing motorists on a nearby road saw the flames and called the fire service.
Good.
They arrived on scene and, following standard protocol, switched off the locomotives to prevent fuel circulating to the flames they were trying to extinguish.
Okay.
With this done, the flames were promptly put out.
Okay.
Firefighters then called the MMA Railway and advised them of what had happened and what had been done. MMA maintenance workers came out to the train and confirmed that it was safe before everyone left the scene.
It's safe? All good? It just burst it just burst into flames a few hours ago. You sure everything's good? This also just it's sad to say it, but it also feels like just mishaps on the part of quite a few of the employees of the various, the engine repair guy. It sounds like the train operator actually did his job, although maybe him and the company could have advocated to fix the train right then and there rather than waiting overnight. Then more train engineers came out and after the fire was put out on the train, and they looked at it and they said, yeah, seems okay. Like that seems like a mistake.
It was around midnight on the 6th of July. The train was stationary on the tracks, the locomotives switched off, and the fire extinguished.
Yes.
To a casual observer, it would have seemed that nothing at all was wrong. But, in actual fact, all was not well. The train was being held in place by two types of brake.
Okay.
A handbrake, which physically secured a brake shoe against the wheels, and an air brake, which used air pressure to do the same thing. Now that the locomotives were switched off, the compressors which provided the air for the air brakes were also switched off.
Okay, so there are more redundant brakes, backup brakes to help with the hand brakes to stop this thing from moving. as you would think with giant trains, there's a lot of brakes, but they turned it off. They turned the whole train off, which turned the brakes off. Wouldn't I'm sorry, but wouldn't they have known, any competent train operator have known that's going to happen? How could they not have known this could, like, they turned the train off. They did that. And they didn't know the repercussions of that?
Air was leaking from the system and not being replaced. Slowly, the pressure in the air brake system dropped until it was no longer sufficient to hold the train in place. Several minutes after the last firefighter left the scene, the massive train began rolling downhill.
Oh.
With nobody at the controls, the train gathered more and more speed with each passing minute.
No way.
It blasted through level crossings, leaving drivers puzzled by the speed of the train, as well as the lack of engine noise or lights.
Yeah.
By the time it reached the town of Lac-Mégantic, it was travelling at around 105 kilometres, or 65 miles, per hour.
What? This is just... What a scary, bizarre sight this would be. A train going faster than any other train you've seen. How fast do trains go, actually? Is 65 mile an hour, is that fast for a train? That's like average for a car on a highway. That's fast. I wouldn't want a 65 mile per hour train coming at me. Let's put it at that. That's really fast for such a big, giant behemoth on wheels, stuffed with oil and periodically bursting into flames. And somehow it was all downhill, like straight to the town. I don't know. It just seems like the craziest series of events that made this happen.
Far too fast for the section of track which passed through the town.
Okay.
It approached at breakneck speed with no lights and no warning except for the sparks and smoke which spewed from its wheels.
No
Near
way.
a level crossing close to the town's main street, the train derailed. Tanker cars smashed into one another in a chaotic jumble, spilling volatile crude oil. This formed a burning river which swept through the downtown area in a manner that some bystanders likened to a tsunami of fire.
What? What is going on? This thing jumped off the rails, smashed into the town, spilled essentially lava, like burning crude oil, down on the town. I need to hear this one. I need to hear this again. This is insane.
Derailed. Tanker cars smashed into one another in a chaotic jumble, spilling volatile crude oil. This formed a burning river which swept through the downtown area in a manner that some bystanders likened to a tsunami of fire. Those who saw it coming tried to flee, with some even leaping from windows to make their escape. But in many cases, the flames simply moved too quickly to be outrun. Buildings were swamped, streets engulfed in fire, and sewers and basements flooded with burning oil.
I mean, this sounds horrible. Horrible. Like, people died from this, but I wasn't sure how much death and destruction this disaster caused. Like, this makes it sound worse than I could have ever imagined, especially with the flaming oil river, like, going through the town and people having to jump out of burning buildings. Like, oh my God.
One of the worst hit locations in Lac-Mégantic was a popular bar known as the Musée Café.
Okay.
The building, which was still packed with patrons at the time of the disaster, was completely consumed.
Jeez. That, like, what do you even say to that? Is he saying that the entire bar filled with people was, like, burned? They were burned, like, alive? Like, destroyed? The bar establishment fell down, burst into flames? All those people died from this? Like, in that bar? I mean, look at this picture. It's amazing, this photo that they have. Like, this kind of tells the story right there. This is, like, hell on earth.
Only those who fled immediately on hearing the crash survived. Some patrons, mistaking the sound for an earthquake, took shelter within the building rather than running. They did not survive. The emergency response began almost immediately, with more than 100 firefighters flocking to the scene. They were presented with an incredibly complex task. Rarely had any of them faced a fire that had quite so much fuel at its disposal.
Yes.
And, being liquid, this fuel spread in unexpected ways.
Outrageous. I have no idea how you deal with something like this.
Flowing down into drains and erupting into basements or cellars several streets away.
Oh my god.
Despite a confusing and dangerous situation, rescuers coordinated extremely well.
Good.
Firefighters worked to block off drains and create fire breaks, then used foam to tackle the flames.
Okay.
Water was used to douse tanker cars that had not yet exploded.
Okay.
Among the people working across the vast area of the disaster was Mr. Harding,
The train operator. I can't even imagine what he was thinking. Like, it wasn't directly his fault, but the guilt he must have faced after seeing this disaster would probably ruined his life.
the engineer who had left the train on the tracks in the first instance.
Yeah.
He had seen the flames consuming the downtown area from his hotel, and had called his bosses to tell them what was going on.
Imagine that phone call. Like, I don't know. I'm sure some part of him wanted to just curl up in a ball in the bathtub.
It had come as a terrible surprise to him to find out that it was his train that had rolled down into the town and caused this devastation.
Jeez.
Leaving his hotel, he joined a small group consisting of firefighters and workers from local industries, who used heavy loading equipment from the factories where they worked to move the few tankers and locomotives that were still on the rails away from the fire.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of his responsibility to go help with this, but it is good that he, to his credit, like, he went into action to try to help. But it's hard to say if he had something to do with all this, like, responsibility-wise. I don't want to, like, point fingers at anyone, but it seemed like a couple of people's fault. Whoever repaired the engine and did a bad job, which caused the fire that the firefighters came and put out. Then the engineers said the train looked good. They shouldn't have said that. They shouldn't have turned off the train, which disabled the brakes. And maybe the train operator here should have had the train repaired immediately, shouldn't have parked it on a downhill grade, should have known not to turn off the train brakes. There's a lot of different things.
Preventing further devastation. Meanwhile, the local hospital was put on high alert, but ultimately received very few casualties.
Wow.
Few of the injuries caused by the disaster had been, in any way, survivable. All in all, 47 people were killed in the disaster, which also destroyed more than 30 buildings, displaced thousands of residents and hundreds of businesses, and all but leveled a huge part of Lac-Mégantic.
So, what do you even say to something like that? Over 40 people dead, untold amount of lives were ruined, destroyed, or disrupted due to this. This was obviously huge news in Canada in 2013, right? When this took place. This must have been huge news. I never heard about this. This story is insane. And it, like, more devastating to this town and its people than I ever imagined.
The flames took 2 days to extinguish. Once they were finally out, an investigation was launched. It was found that many factors had contributed to the disaster.
Yeah.
Prominently, Mr. Harding, the train engineer, had failed to apply enough handbrakes before leaving the train.
You know, I was wondering about that. These hand brakes, you just spin them in a circle to turn on the brakes, and it's like, just depends on how much you can tighten it by hand. Doesn't seem that safe. And then something like this has to happen for people to realize, Maybe it's safe if you do it correctly. I don't know. But yeah. So, again, talking about blame, it kind of was this train engineer, this train operator, this guy. A lot of the blame is on him, actually. That's inexcusable. That's inexcusable to be responsible for a train and to not correctly turn on the brakes. There's no excuse. And then 40 plus people die and a town explodes. There's no coming back from that. There's no like, whoopsie, I'll be careful next time. It's like, no. Like, you just ruined so many people's lives. Like, as sad as that is to say, like, that's the reality.
He had used 7 handbrakes, but should have applied more than twice that number for a train of that size and weight.
What?
He had made another error by testing the brakes while both the handbrakes and the air brakes were applied. He should have switched off the air brakes for the test to ensure that the train could be held in place by the action of the handbrakes alone.
Okay, I don't have any sympathy anymore. Like, I don't have any sympathy. Like that, it's totally his fault. Complete negligence, incompetence, whatever you want to call it. Like, he had 40 people killed, or whatever the number was. He directly responsible. Like, you need to know what you're doing. End of story.
3 men, including Mr. Harding and 2 other railway employees, were put on trial, charged with 47 counts of criminal negligence causing death.
Yeah.
While there was considerable public anger about the disaster, most of it was not directed at these individuals,
Really?
but instead was saved for the MMA railway. It emerged that the company had provided minimal training, had ignored complaints about the safety of its track, had used outdated tankers, cut corners on repairs, and in many other ways demonstrated an extremely relaxed attitude towards safety over the course of many years.
Okay. I am revising my previous statements. This is interesting, and I'm glad that this came to light. I was pissed at this train operator. But the employees are employees, especially at a company like this, just follow the instructions of the company and just do what they're trained to do. So if the company does not adequately train its employees and then takes them and says, okay, go off and work, go ahead, you're ready to run the giant train full of oil. If the company says that, that's what they're going to go do. That's not their fault. They think they're ready. They think they've been trained. If your company is telling you to go do, and they got a job to do, yeah, totally. It's the company is MMA. Horrible, terrible. I hope they were totally, I don't know, sued, fined. Did someone go to jail over this? Because this is horrible. I hope something happened.
Given these factors, all 3 men were eventually acquitted.
Okay.
Legal proceedings began against the MMA Railway,
Good.
which subsequently announced bankruptcy and
Good.
laid off most of its employees.
Eh.
Outside of the MMA Railway, many changes in procedure were brought in by railways across Canada and the US.
Right.
Stricter rules to cover how trains must be left if left overnight,
Right.
how they must be maintained, and to determine which trains and which routes can accommodate dangerous or flammable substances.
You know, that's exactly what I was anticipating. Like, this disaster caused a lot of policy changes within the train industry. Probably too little, too late, at least for the town of Lac-Mégantic. Super sad story. Just because of some greedy company not training its employees well. And a couple of other bad luck things, but that just doesn't feel good. Like, nothing about this is good, but if the train had had some kind of freak accident where a boulder rolled down a hill and dislodged the train, that would have somehow felt better in a sick way than human negligence. This is just humans who own this company who didn't train their employees, which resulted in the death of 40 plus people. And that's terrible. Yeah, this was just an awful story to hear about, but, you know, as for the historical significance and, in the memory of those who lost their lives in this disaster, for those reasons, I appreciated hearing about this, and I do feel real bad for those people who died, and everybody whose life was, a lot of people's lives, businesses and families were ruined by this. It's horrible. But it was good to kind of hear this story. I'd never heard of it before. I think a lot of Americans have never heard of this, so that was crazy. Anyway, if you enjoyed this, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on the Lac-Mégantic disaster. If you remember hearing about this, if you were affected by this, yeah, please leave a comment. That'd be amazing to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Canada and learning about Canadian culture, seeing Canadian things I have never seen, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.